Around 80% of ocean plastic comes from mere 1,000 rivers around the world. 90% of this comes from the 10 highest populated rivers globally. Let's talk about that.
You've been down on your luck, lost the drive and the ride, you was settling up. And I remember when mom used to pet me at lunch. The preparation made me ask, am I having enough? Cause when you ask, now you have not. Scooters on the back block, feeling scrape my knee, I left my ego on the blacktop. And honestly, it never damaged my pride, cause see my faith had been a fuel to truly keep me alive. Through the dark days, hard times, dealing with some issues I was scared to admit. I pretend they wasn't there and said they failed to exist until it all hit the fan. And there I am.
Now, before I begin, we did a video on ocean plastics a couple weeks ago, and I would highly recommend you going to watch that first. It'll be linked right here. Annually, these rivers supply 0.8 to 2.7 million metric tons of ocean plastic per year. This is comparable to around 1 billion African elephants. Rivers are responsible for most of the ocean plastic pollution due to the large amount of inland populations living among them. All fresh water, whether it be headwater streams or large ranging rivers, feed into the ocean. Headwater streams are streams at the highest point of a watershed. If thinking about it like the human circulatory system, they would be the very, very small capillaries that feed into the larger veins and arteries of our body. The 10 biggest offenders that produce the most plastic are the Amur, the Ganges, the Hai, Indus, Mekong, Niger, Nile, River, Yellow, and Yangtze rivers. Not in order, this is in alphabetical order. Dr. Schmidt from the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research discovered that per cubic meter, plastic in large rivers was much, much higher than plastic in smaller rivers. This stems from larger rivers having a larger population living among them. These populations that live among these rivers that I had previously said have very, very inadequate waste disposal systems. So instead of them giving their trash to a disposal system to dispose it correctly or recycle it, they just kind of throw it into the river that they're living along. One of the most ecologically important rivers around the world is also the most polluted and the highest contributing river to ocean plastic. It is the Yangtze River in China. It is China's most important river, also being China's most important watershed. It holds the majority of China's grain and around 500 million people. This is 1/3 of China's population living along this river. China has begun efforts to decrease the amount of waste. However, I will get more into cleanups and what humans are doing to alleviate this river plastic stress later in the video. So why is plastic entering ecosystems, especially marine and freshwater, so destructive? While plastic was an innovative discovery, more than 50% of plastic created today is created for single use. This is plastic bags, stuff that you normally would just throw away rather than reuse multiple times. This means an alarming amount of the 300 million tons of plastic produced each year is thrown away and will inevitably enter the world's waterways. According to a study done by the Ocean Conservancy, 60% of seabird species and 100% of sea turtle species have been found with plastic inside their system. This synthetic material does not readily break down or is ingested inside an organism. This means that when plastic enters an ecosystem, it can stay in that ecosystem undecomposed for as little as 50 years and as much as 1,000 years. The residence time of these plastics provides adverse effects to the ecosystem as a whole. As I said earlier, these plastics cannot be digested. So when an organism consumes them, the plastics just stay in their digestive tract, not allowing for the organism to eat regular food that they would need to survive, and ultimately the organism dies of starvation. We will now have the first guest to this channel, one of my professors from my undergrad, Dr. Wallace from Millersville University. He is the professor of entomology, aquatic entomology, forensic and medical entomology, and stream ecology. He is also the director of the Millersville Center for Environmental Sciences, and he's going to be joining us to talk about his research with Dr. Rachel McNeish. They did a study on the land use effect on temporal comparison of the presence and abundance of microplastics in riverine systems. Please give a warm welcome to our first guest, Dr. Wallace. So I want to start everything off by asking you about your research of microplastics in riverine systems.
Talked to Ray McNeish, who I think you've spoken with, and so Ray's collaborating. And so we started this project looking at the effects of land use on microplastic abundance and diversity in not in the water, but in the macroinvertebrates. We didn't know if we'd even find it in the insects, and sure enough, we did. And we presented the data for the first time, and we're looking at it from a 3-decade span, 1999, 2010, and 2019, and from samples from those 3 years. And we've got samples from forested land use, agricultural, and urban. And we've found microplastics probably in about, if we're talking about macroinvertebrates and you count worms and things like, non-insects, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 different families of macroinvertebrates. And not only that, but we've been finding it not just in the larvae, but in the pupae, which is kind of exciting in one sense, but in another, disturbing.
Okay, yeah.
And that means that the microplastics are being transferred, what we call transstadially. So it goes from the larva to the pupa. What we don't know is if it goes to the adult. Okay, and so we're going to have a 30-year time span. Where we'll have a very good comparison of what's going on with microplastic type and microplastic abundance in these macroinvertebrates as a function of land use. That's one project. That's the first one. If you look at some of the review studies that talk about microplastics in the environment, 92% of all plastic that's ever been produced is still out there. Right, and if you look at, say, from the somewhere around the late 1950s to now, there's been 8.3 billion metric tons of microplastic produced. Right. Well. Yeah. Well. Yeah. And the thing is that 30% of that is still in use. Okay. A little more than half of that has been discarded, so it's still out there in the environment. It's just been discarded. And believe it or not, only about 6% of that 8.3 billion metric tons has been recycled. So the question is here, we're finding microplastics in all kinds of organisms. There's all kinds of studies that have found them in algae, in protists, and in snails, in honeybees, in honeybee comb, is pervasive. The question is, how much of it is getting to us?
Yeah. I think I was looking at a study, and per year, humans who regularly eat seafood are ingesting 11,000 pieces of microplastic, most of it being I forget.
Fiber.
Yeah, most of it being fiber.
Yeah. Well, fiber. So what your followers have to understand is that microplastics are anything up to 5 millimeters in size, but that also means things that are almost nano sized too. Yeah. And the thing is that I don't that's an extrapolated number, but if you do eat a lot of seafood, you may be ingesting a lot of microplastics. The question is, where is it ending up?
Now, what you just saw was only a short, very condensed version of the actual interview, and we will be posting the full interview. So if you want to see that, click here. If you don't want to see that, well, that's a mistake. I would highly recommend seeing it. It is between 15 and 20 minutes long, but is very, very interesting and invigorating. Please go watch. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to this channel? Please like, comment, and share. And subscribe to my new Marine Fact Friday channel, which I will be starting to post videos over the summer. The link will be right here. Aside from starvation, these plastics also leach very, very dangerous chemicals into the water column and inside of the organism that ingests the plastic. A 2009 study shows that plastic does not decompose into the ocean due to rain and sun. However, as they break down, they release different chemicals that can be detected in the parts per million range. As I said earlier, these chemicals not only break down in the water column, but also inside of organisms. Dr. Sadio of the College of Pharmacy, Nihon University in China, stated that his research showed that when plastic decomposes, it releases bisphenol, BPA, and PS oilgomer into the water column. Scientists are concerned because BPA and PS oilgomer can disrupt the functions of hormones and the natural reproductive systems in some organisms. Researchers at the University of Wau Cameroon, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, have found that BPA has disruptive effects on the male reproductive systems. It has also been found that fetuses in the womb have a very, very high risk of contamination by increased prostate sizes, shifts in adult sperm counts, as well as mobility and mass of the sperm cells, and the overall male fertilization. As Dr. Wallace said in the interview, we have seen this in tree swallows that the BPA has destroyed the reproductive nature of males. So the males aren't actively trying to sing to get mates, which decreases the overall fitness of the entire species. As I said in the ocean plastics video, which if you haven't seen, I don't know why you haven't, go watch it. The two largest contributors to river cleanups are 4Ocean and the Ocean Cleanup. 4Ocean uses remote sentries that are posted in river mouths to collect garbage from rivers before they actually enter the ocean. They have collected 8,800,000 total pounds of plastic since their inception in 2017. The Ocean Cleanup not only has ocean devices to clean plastic, but also river systems that they're starting to implement. They're called the Interceptor. This device has 6 dumpsters inside of a larger containment. This larger piece has a conveyor belt to deposit the riverine plastics into the dumpster. They have implemented 2 of these systems in rivers, and they can collect around 50,000 kilograms of garbage per day. These systems that I have mentioned, they can only work in large river systems. As Dr. Wallace said, there's really no management systems in place to deal with plastics in these headwater streams. The only system that works for these capillaries of rivers, if you will, is to reduce the amount of garbage that actually enters them in the first place. There's no system to remove the plastic after it has entered the headwater. The only thing we can do is remove it after it enters the larger rivers. It is very important that we begin to reduce the amount of plastic that we are producing and throwing away. Plastic is causing profound disturbances in the life cycle for many organisms and habitats. Plastic is causing profound disturbances in the cycle of life for many organisms and habitats. We need to reduce the amount of plastic before it causes permanent damage to different ecosystems. We need to do something now while we are able to, because once this problem becomes out of hand, we won't be able to turn back the clock.
Everybody on the top got the same sound. Everything I'm about to drop, make a name now. Yeah, y'all don't really know, y'all don't really know. Y'all don't really know, y'all don't really know. Yeah.